Hello and welcome to Commissioner's Corner. I'm Commissioner Charlotte Garrido, and today we're going to talk about a very exciting project out in the Harper area. Because we live on a peninsula here in Kitsap County, we're nearly surrounded by shoreline, some 300 plus miles of shoreline. And so that we have the opportunity to see beautiful scenery, water, mountains, and especially water activities and habitat. They are so important to our quality of life. And for many years, we've heard South Kitsap residents talk about, especially those in the Harper area, about the estuary and restoring the healthy function to that estuary. And Kitsap County has tried hard over the years to find some funding to help us be able to do that. During some of the recent projects that we've done out there in the area, we've heard local citizens say specific things about the estuary. Two of the nearby projects were the construction of the Curly Creek Bridge, as well as the Southworth Road widening at Harper, between Harper and Olympiad Drive. We learned a lot from local residents in both of those projects. I recall during the planning for the road widening that conversations with neighbors contributed tremendously to that final project. You know that Southworth Drive is a prominent route through South Kitsap for local traffic, and it's also part of the Mosquito Fleet Trail, which is especially to encourage bicycling and pedestrian amenities. In 2010, Kitsap County Public Works completed a safety improvement project on Southworth Drive along that roadway. At the time, this stretch of road was a narrow two-lane road with no shoulders, so that it posed some extreme safety hazards for pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as motorists themselves. The project actually widened that roadway to 11-foot lanes and added 4-foot shoulders on either side for foot and bike traffic. And stormwater enhancements were made as well. Citizens were very concerned about losing the specialness of their community, of their beautiful, beautiful area with this project. And they helped us to imagine some simple and effective ideas that could be incorporated into the design. The ultimate design shows those impacts. They still have the beautiful water vista that is prized by the neighbors and those of us who pass through that community. While the road is wider, there are also improvements to ensure safer passageways for pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as vehicles. If you haven't seen it, the sides of the roadway, those 4-foot shoulders, are painted a brick color. This delineates a separation of those who walk and bike from those who travel by car. The brick color reflects the historical importance of the nearby Harper Brickyard, so important there decades ago. And we encourage neighbors to participate in a program to install rain gardens and reduce pollutants even more. Further, there are temporary radar signs that are introduced from time to time to help maintain reasonable speeds along that roadway. But to return to the Harper Estuary project, now that funding is available. Our objective is habitat restoration at Harper Estuary to increase tidal inundation and restore estuary habitat. The Department of Ecology, the Washington Department of Ecology, secured the funding. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife will be managing the overall project. The portion that Kitsap County has a role is to involve and engage community members with this project. We know that local people understand this estuary well and that they will be an important part of shaping the design for restoration. So we're going to encourage continuous and ongoing public awareness and participation by private property owners, shoreline owners, and the general public. Again, the project design will be developed and vetted through extensive outreach work with the local community. We, and I'm talking about Sue Donahue, who is here with me, and I want to develop a friendly and focused outreach with the community that includes Harper residents and those from the broader area. Our Kitsap team, as I said, includes Sue Donahue, who is the senior manager of the Harper Estuary Restoration Project. Sorry about that. Yeah. Kathy Peters and Patty Charnas from Natural Resources in Department of Community Development, and myself. You will see Sue and I out and about in Harper in the early months of 2014. We will organize lots of opportunities to talk about this project. We want to hear from you. We're going to be gathering feedback about restoration alternatives. We're going to help determine the monitoring needs and feasibility improvements. Sue will be looking to determine some of the potential contamination, and we'll be really having fun assessing some of the rich cultural resources, and I mentioned the brick factory, that are in that area. Sue, would you like to tell us a little more about what will be happening at the Harper Estuary in the coming months?
Yes, I'm very excited to be on board with the county here working on this project, as this Harper Estuary is also in my neighborhood as well. And so I'm just looking forward to working with the community on all of the facts as they come across to us. First of all, I think maybe what we'll try to do is just discuss what estuaries are, since we're talking about an estuary restoration, and what is their function, what kind of habitats do estuaries provide. And then I'll just kind of go into the importance of the Harper Estuary and relate back to the history a bit of that very actually historical area of South Kitsap. An estuary is really just a partially enclosed body of water, and it's formed where the fresh water, the groundwater and the streams come together and converge into the salt water of the ocean. The estuaries come in all shapes and sizes, and they have many different names. You could name an estuary, you would call it a bay, a lagoon, a harbor, an inlet, or a sound. In the case of Harper, it's a small pocket estuary. It's a very small estuary, and a better term for it might be a coastal inlet. Healthy estuaries provide us with productive ecosystems, erosion and flood control, pollutant filtering, flyways for birds, recreation, education, and aesthetic sources, and they also have very important commercial values. Now, these are estuaries that are very large on a large scale, but we do have these types of estuaries within Puget Sound. Habitats, estuaries create a rich nursery environment for salmon and other species. Thousands of birds, mammals, fish, and other wildlife rely on estuarine habitats to live, feed, and reproduce. As far as the productive ecosystems goes, acre for acre, estuaries are among the most biologically productive ecosystems on our Earth. Erosion and flood control, estuaries serve as a buffer for flooding and protecting shorelines from erosion as well. Pollutant filtering, estuaries naturally filter the pollutants and thereby improve the water quality. They provide a flyway for birds, and that would include shorebirds. They're a resting and refueling station for duck, geese, shorebirds, pintails, brant, teals, mallard, Canada geese, trumpeter swans, and a few species that stop there to graze on seeds and grasses and the small invertebrates available to them. Recreationally, educationally, and aesthetically is a very important factor that estuaries provide for us. They provide boating, fishing, swimming for other locations, not at Harper Estuary. Windsurfing and bird watching are just a few of the activities that people enjoy. Also, an important aspect to estuaries is, and needs to be recognized, that they have had commercial value. Estuaries serve as nursery grounds for 2/3 of the nation's commercial fish and shellfish. Now that's a big perspective, but the Harper Estuary has also been a place of industrial activity with the brick manufacturing industry back in the early 1900s.
Up through the 1930s, I believe,
To the
or even more.
Yeah, yeah. So the habitats that estuaries provide are a mix of different zones. You could look at it. And so you've got the higher beach area, you've got the intertidal zone, you've got shallow water subtidal and deep water subtidal. And higher up on the beach, you'll have salt grasses, and those are dissected by shallow drainage channels. Beyond the tidal water and above the tidal water, you'd have less salt-tolerant plants that would appear, and those would be, in the Puget Sound area, tufted hair grasses, march aster, and red fescue. But those are not specifically in the Harper area right now. The intertidal zone is an area of the sloping mudflats, and that's fringed with the marsh salt vegetation. The plants there are tough and they're tolerant of the salt water, so they are saltwater plants, and that would include pickleweed, which is there at Harper, spurry, and arrowgrass. Shorebirds, herons, and raccoons forage for food here. In the shallow water subtidal zone, seals, waterfowl, and many species of fish graze on the rich and abundant food sources that are found in the water. Important, this area, this intertidal or subtidal zone, is very important for the young salmon traveling from downstream to the estuary, out into the water, out into the salt water, where they feed and they grow. Here is where the young salmon adjust to the salt water and get ready for their ocean journey. The other habitat area would be the deeper subtidal zone, where you could have Pacific oysters, and if you have a gravel floor or if you have a sandy floor, you can have sand dollar snails and several species of clams. A muddy floor can also support clams, shrimps, and worms. So going on to a look at our present day Harper Estuary, as we mentioned before, Harper Estuary is very small. It's a small pocket estuary, but on the Kitsap side, on the west side of Puget Sound, these small pocket estuaries are common. On the east side, they have the larger estuaries, but those estuaries have been pretty well degraded to the point where the smaller baby salmon coming from the streams on the east side of Puget Sound, the larger streams on the east side of Puget Sound, end up coming over and foraging in our small estuary, pocket estuary areas. And there's a great map here that shows us where these all small pocket estuaries are, especially on the west side of Puget Sound. And it shows us where there's properly functioning estuaries and where there's at-risk estuaries, and the mile radius where the fish have to go. And Harper ends up being in a 10-mile radius from the east side streams of Puget Sound for the fish to travel to, and it's also designated as an at-risk estuary.
Can you walk us through what the codes are so we know what we're seeing in the yellow crosses?
Okay, the yellow crosses are pocket estuaries that are at risk. The green crosses are the properly functioning estuaries, and the red ones are the not properly functioning estuaries. The light green shaded area of Puget Sound is the area that is the 5-mile seaward buffer of natal estuaries. That means where they came from and where they can go. And then there's the 10-mile darker green radius. So generally speaking, the estuarine habitat can be altered due to filling in of marshes and tidal flats and any kind of reconstruction of the shorelines to accommodate the needs for development, transportation, or agriculture. And these activities are what have historically degraded our estuarine habitat and the saltwater wetlands. And as that degradation occurs, then that's also degraded the habitat that's available to support the healthy populations of the wildlife and marine organisms as well, which is the key factor for foraging of the younger salmon. If we get into the history of the Harper Estuary, there's many different historical activities that are specific to the Harper Estuary that have led to its degradation in the habitat.
Can we talk about that just for a minute? Because I know how important the brick factory was. It was a huge employer for the time. And they exported bricks, I know, to Seattle, and I'm told also to San Francisco, to the whole West Coast, but especially to major cities. And we know that there are a number of bricks in the water, the clinkers, they call them, the bricks that were rejects.
Yeah.
So I understand that I mean, who would have thought that there was any problem with throwing those old bricks in the water? But I understand that there is some toxicity. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, any unnatural fill that's not the natural gravels or sand or mud that's derived from the sediments, in Puget Sound, does not harbor, or underneath that fill, the opportunity is lost for the habitat to thrive. So your organisms, your invertebrates, and the food that the fish eat is not available to them in the fill areas. So that would be one big impact, and then other effects of the fill, the sediment transport, and the tidal influence.
So that's actually a really important transformation of the way that we thought maybe 100 or 50 or 100 years ago, and that we think today about water quality. I think it's really interesting to talk to some of the old timers, and the late Cora Brinton was one of my best contacts on this, because she was pretty passionate. She'd grown up as a young girl in that area and had spent the rest of her life. But she talked about not only the employment, but she told me about the trains, the little track that would bring the cars would bring the bricks down to the water, and they'd load them onto tugboats and take them, ship them out from there. But of course there was probably some loss into the water even there, just from things falling over. But I think that it's an important part of the story of Harper, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from people in the area about what their memories are of the Harper brick factory, as well as their understandings of what impacts there are today from something that is still important to that region.
And it's true, it's kind of unique along Kitsap shoreline. We've built up our roads along the shoreline, and that dates back in history to the accommodations for the mosquito fleet. So our roads they stayed there.
Well, they were actually settled along, because that's how people arrived in Kitsap.
So we have an interesting history, and
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Good. I'm sorry I interrupted some of your...
So what we've put together here are the activities that have degraded the Harper estuary environment, and those include the road construction through the estuary, and we've got inadequate tidal exchange going on because of inappropriately sized road culvert. It's much too small. The brick or clinker fill from the brick manufacturing operation, and then also there was other miscellaneous fill, and that includes fill around the boat ramp, probably to accommodate the boat ramp at that point.
So again, recalling even 40 or 50 years ago, we weren't nearly as careful or even understand that there were certain qualities that we needed to look for in the kinds of soil that we might
because some of these
build up.
changes occurred like back in, the alterations occurred back in the early 1900s, and
Right.
others are really recent. Well, I guess we can go on and talk about what it is. Charlotte already touched on the fact that this Harper restoration will accomplish a restoration of the tidal processes and reclamation of the estuary habitat. And that's the habitat that's been degraded by the roadway fill and the undersized culvert. So we've provided here for the video just pictures of estuaries that are located in Kitsap County, that are local, and that have been restored. And the pictures that you can see on the screen would include Driftwood Cove, Indianola, Dokeguatz, and Carpenter Creek, probably. Yeah. We want to involve the community for this whole project, and we just want to make sure that the community has a vision, or that we know what the community vision for Harper area is, and that we have extensive coordination with all of the proponents involved in the project and affected property owners and all other stakeholders, as Charlotte has mentioned. And that is my job.
Hear, hear.
And we want also to, we're just beginning, so we will be putting together means to communicate, and meetings and dates and things like that. But we will also just want to, initially, we just want you to know that we'll be, we will be beginning the community outreach starting now, and any community involvement, and that includes historical documentation as well. And that the project through the Department of Fish and Wildlife are scheduled to begin in January 2014 to be out at the site surveying and doing some preliminary studies. So we will make every attempt to communicate with you and answer questions as this project progresses.
Actually, that's our whole purpose here. We are partnering with Department of Fish and Wildlife, who is managing the bigger project. But we know that it's essential to have the voices of Kitsap residents who are the experts on their own surroundings in a very special way. And so we will be out talking with you and holding meetings and open houses. We will be providing information in newsletters, electronically. There will be a website that Sue is putting together. We'll be conducting surveys. We'll come to your home and talk to you if you want us to, because we feel like it is really, really important. It's going to be so much fun for us too, because we look forward to taking lots of more pictures of the area, seeing it through the seasons in a more careful way than maybe we've done in the past, and a very consecutive and ordered manner. But we're very interested in hearing your stories. We're really, really interested to see the pictures you love of the Harper Estuary. We know that there's some real treasure out there in our community, and we're looking forward to putting that together in a really impactful way so that we put together a project that makes terrific sense for Kitsap County, for Harper Estuary, and that does help us restore some natural function, some health to the Harper Estuary. So we will be listening for your stories. We'll be looking for those photos. We'll be taking some photos. We'll be documenting what we're hearing. And above all, we look forward to spending some time with you, from hearing from you, and for restoring Harper Estuary to natural function. So look for us out in your neighborhood soon.